Welcome to a new episode of ChristoFinance. Today we talk, as usual, about Bitcoin, a bit geopolitics, a bit about decentralized technologies, and in particular about the question whether Bitcoin is like gold or something completely different. And this question was triggered not only by a couple of questions that I am receiving on a regular basis, but also Fed Chair Powell recently said that Bitcoin is very much like a digital variant of gold. Let's deep dive a bit on the implications of that. So on the one hand side, I certainly believe that it is a statement made not to like foster Bitcoin and to proliferate Bitcoin, but in particular under the umbrella of the new upcoming administration on the one hand side, and on the other hand side, not to discredit the dollar, because if you see Bitcoin more like a commodity rather than a currency or actually money, then it's easier to classify. It's easier to structure that and cluster that in the assets or commodity sphere. And having said that, when it comes to Bitcoin, there are indeed certain attributes that are quite similar to gold, especially when it comes to the scarcity aspect and the sound money aspect, which the name sound money actually is derived by the gold coins making a harder sound when nudging them to a table. But the idea of hard money, which is a common denominator, hence the easy analogy of people comparing gold and Bitcoin and throw them into one bucket, is that you have this sound money aspect. Okay, so far so good. But and I would agree on that common denominator. But what is the actual difference here? Is Bitcoin really like gold, or do we have other aspects that are fundamentally and diametrally different from a commodity like gold or other precious metals? The answer is clearly yes, because we not only have a digital variant in Bitcoin. This is the obvious differentiation. Okay, so Bitcoin is the digital variant, and gold and other precious metals are the physical equivalent of hard money. But this isn't. I'm not referring to this obvious point. I'm rather referring to that you have transparency in terms of validation. What does it mean? So in Bitcoin, you actually can verify all coins in circulation with every block. So you know which public key holds which asset, which number of Bitcoin in the public key or in the Bitcoin address. And you can verify the total number in circulation at any given point. So the entirety of the maximum of close to 21 million Bitcoin ever will be in circulation is transparent every second of the existence, which is obviously not the case with gold. So no one knows how much gold is owned by whom, and even worse, it's not even known how much gold actually was mined in its entirety. So there are rough estimations between 12 and 20 trillion US dollar equivalent of gold seem to be existing on this planet, but no one actually knows, and it can't be verified. Obviously, there's in reference to the gold bugs amongst us, this is also a benefit because you have actually no clue where it is, which provides a certain set of privacy at the same time. So there's not a pure good or pure bad variant of this attribute, but also you have no idea from a monetary perspective if you really want to have an monetary system on top of gold, it obviously would be better if you have an understanding what is the total gold supply in circulation. And at least that's the Bitcoiner's perspective, right? And it makes sense from a gold bug perspective, because if I have no clue what my neighbors have, or what the entirety of the world population is stacking in gold, obviously it's very hard to verify the hardness, the hardness in terms of the underlying monetary value or counter value. And different with Bitcoin, it is 100% transparent, 100% verifiable at any given block. So that's the first major difference, next to the obvious differences, of course. But if we dive deeper into this setup, you also have gold. Usually, that's another main differentiating factor. Usually, you have gold in a setup that you require a trusted third party, at least when it comes to larger amounts of gold. Yeah, of course, you can put that gold bar under your mattress. That's totally possible. But when it comes to larger amounts of gold, it's typically sticks with like central banks or other centralized custodians safekeeping your Bitcoin and safekeeping your gold in this case. And we come to the compression in Bitcoin in a second. And when they safekeep the gold, obviously, same problem again. No one knows what is the gold reserves, right? So are the gold actually there in the vault, or is it just paper in circulation, like paper gold in circulation? And this is the issue with gold, with the gold market per se, is that between 80 and 100 times the value of the physical gold in circulation. The numbers vary depending on the source you consult, but 80 times to 100 times the amount of physical gold, which is physical gold, and 80 to 100 times of that is in circulation, and in circulation in terms of trading. Okay, so you have derivatives, options, futures, maybe even like forwards, which are traded on top of the physical gold. So you have these underlying asset, which is the commodity, precious metal gold, and on top of that you have a lot of paper gold in terms of financial instruments, or which are called derivatives. Usually it's a form of certificate or a form of future where you have the chance to bet or the opportunity to bet on price changes, either rising or like decreasing price changes. Having said this is a huge issue, because you can read in several sources that the gold price by this paper gold was and still is manipulated to a certain extent. It's hard to grasp how much of the gold price is real and how much is manipulated via this artificial supply, which is comes by the derivatives which are traded in worldwide gold markets. But it is clear that you can, by creating derivatives out of the thin air, hence the name paper gold, it is clear that you can, at least on a short notice, easily have a fake, with fake I mean with artificial demand or artificial supply. Yeah. There's other aspects to it. For instance, you can arbitrage spot markets and futures markets. There's different kinds of gold market arbitrage opportunities. It gets more and more complex when you also have some interest considerations in there. But let's leave out the traditional finance world for a second and return to in comparison to Bitcoin, and compare what our video today is about. Compare gold against Bitcoin. And in Bitcoin, yeah, theoretically, you can do the same with Bitcoin in theory for the very simple reason that obviously, yes, there are options and futures also on Bitcoin. Even in the major financial services players and exchanges, there are gold as Bitcoin futures. You can trade that instantly if you want that to. But the main difference is that the very scarce supply in Bitcoin, which is we have already issued more than 19.6 of the 21 million Bitcoin. So that's the vast majority of Bitcoin is already allocated. And together with the circumstance that you can't create Bitcoin out of thin air, and it is at the same time 100% transparent, and you can verify it at any given second. These two facts together make it very hard for real paper Bitcoin in circulation. Yeah? Obviously, you can try to do short-term market price manipulations, but in the long run, it's almost impossible for the very same reason that you can't create them out of thin air. Yeah, and most of the accumulated addresses, when it comes to Bitcoin addresses, for instance, for the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF, they are transparent in a way that you have the Bitcoin addresses published, and you can verify the inflows at every given moment. It is true that you don't know the other leg of this deal, the other financial leg of this financial trade, right? So you probably know the Bitcoin inflow, but you know the underlying inflow, but you don't know what was the purchasing leg in the very first place. This is true. We don't know how many ETFs BlackRock literally sold. It is clear that when you would sell more ETF, or like Bitcoin ETFs would be sold more than they are holding in custody. Obviously, they would be in breach of the ETF regulatories. This is clear, and it's always said, of course, we don't trust, but we verify. So, like Bitcoin are saying. This makes sense, but at the same time, you have a very scarce limitation. So this scarce limitation prevents you from creating Bitcoin out of thin air in the long run. There are further differences, of course, next to the aspect that it is clear with Bitcoin, and it's much easier to put in your pocket, and you're gone. If you want to, you're gone for a longer vacation, right? If you want to, or if you need to, right? So we're seeing right now much more repressive, for instance, recently in Austria and Italy, in Europe, and also in other countries of the world, we've seen much more taxation rules or tax regimes not in favor of any Bitcoin investments. This is true, but at the same time, you have the option to quickly move. So to quickly move where you are treated best, right? And it's much harder with gold. Obviously, you can relocate, but there's much more effort to relocate gold. Sure, you can buy it in some free havens. This is all possible, and is already done a lot in the financial industry today. But it's not really convenient. You're not really sovereign with your Bitcoin you're not really sovereign with your gold in your pocket, because you're not really able to cross any borders with like more than typically like 10 or 15,000 of fiat equivalent. And different story with Bitcoin, where you basically have a worldwide ledger and you just need to store in your head 12 or 24 words, and you're completely mobile in this regard. Yeah, this I think are the basic differences. It is clear that on a Bitcoin standard or in a Bitcoin strategic reserve, that's what, for instance, we were seeing right now with some major BRICS plus countries. They proposed a Bitcoin strategic reserve. And it is actually the same that the new US administration already announced for having a total strategic reserve of 1 million Bitcoin over the next 5 years. This is going to be interesting because what we see right now is fear of missing out amongst nation states, actually the biggest nation states, right? So it's not comparable to, you have a like South American country adopting a fancy new alternative asset as legal tender, but you have major nation states competing and rushing towards a Bitcoin strategic reserve. And I haven't expected that so early, actually, but it's interesting to see. And I am fully aware that you have the discussion, okay, so now you have the really big players in the market. Basically, Wall Street is taking over the Bitcoin revolution. No, this is not the case. For the very simple reason is because you can't print new paper Bitcoin. Yeah. So, of course, as a Wall Street, you can buy Bitcoin. You can buy in your share. You get the price you deserve. It's a almost 6-digit figure price by now. Yeah. Okay. This is a free market, and Bitcoin is apolitical, which is its benefit, right? So this is the reason why you cannot afford to lose out on this opportunity, because it is apolitical. It does not favor one side or the other side, and this makes it the global trade instrument of the next decade, for the very simple reason because BRICS plus states will stop to basically accept our fiat currencies in the future. It's a very slow and gradual process, but it's obvious that for a while now, for instance, Eastern players already started to reduce their purchase in U.S. treasuries, and this was only the beginning, and obviously they fostered their new multipolar world also on a different currency approach, right? And this is interesting to see that you have literally fear of missing out amongst nation states by now. So, and when talking about central banks worldwide, you obviously have the gold asset as a strategic reserve so far. They still hold gold, but only smaller parts of the total currency in circulation is covered by gold, actually. We are far away from a gold standard, not even a gold referencing standard. So we have some remainings in the central bank's vaults that should give us a trust feeling that it is backed by something, but it actually is only a super small part of what is actually in circulation, which is true for all major Western central banks. I can't speak for the BRICS plus countries. I haven't analyzed them, but that's true for usually the G7, G8 countries. I can speak for them right now. And yeah, this is interesting to see how nation states will adopt Bitcoin as a parallel strategic reserve asset next to gold. So in the new day and age, we will see Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. Maybe we see also some major trades like global trades and exports being covered or being facilitated on the basis of Bitcoin. Because I don't see a dedicated BRICS currency. It's too complicated, and BRICS states are too heterogeneous to basically issue their own trade currency. So they will fall back either to nation states currencies, which we have seen partly in the last couple of months and years, or they will actually fall back to an apolitical money that can't be controlled by any specific single party, which actually is Bitcoin. So this doesn't mean that gold won't be interesting. Certainly, there's some benefits, and certainly from the track record compared to Bitcoin's like 16 years to gold's more than 1,000 years, it's certainly a decent track record. And you have to say, when it comes to, and this is for the gold bucks amongst us, right? So you can, back then you purchased, like back then 100 years ago, you were able to purchase a standard like typical quality men's suit with 1 ounce of gold, and this is valid till today. So in any standard tailor, you are still today, you're able with 1 fine ounce of gold to purchase and to buy your standard men's suit. And this is quite interesting. This is actually the preservation of buying power. And when you understand this store of value, which is a store of working time, because usually people like us, we have to work for this money, right? And the first and foremost feature and first and foremost task of money is to preserve the buying power, because it's your lifetime. Okay, and this is something that gold achieves. So I'm absolutely in the sound money in the sound money team. Okay, and in my opinion, since gold is not absolutely scarce, you typically have a couple of thousand like a couple of thousand tons mined every year, which are in addition to the supply, which is corresponding to about 1.8 to 2% of new gold supply is added each day. Apologies, is added each day, and what you can see is this also stock to flow ratio is relevant when you can compare to the gold inflation, which is the aforementioned 1.8 to 2%, and in Bitcoin it is lower than that. You right now, with the recent halving, you have an rate much below that. I think it's roughly 1.5% of Bitcoin in circulation. So having that said, Bitcoin, and let's quickly sum up, right? Bitcoin and gold at the same time, they have benefits when it comes to the scarcity. It's quite interesting to see that in both setups, we see the value derived as a store of value, and the store of value function then have different aspects. For instance, when it comes to a medium of exchange. So obviously with gold, it is hard to get at to the destination of your choice. Much easier with Bitcoin, for instance. Gold is hard to accept. When it comes to the supermarket, it's very hard to pay in the supermarket with a coin, with a gold coin. Same is true right now for Bitcoin. So obviously there is lightning you can pay with Bitcoin, but it's not common right now. There is one interesting thought that I want to also get into the gold team here, because when obviously Bitcoin is required as a digital technology, it is required that you have a certain infrastructure. So typically you need internet, typically internet needs a device, and this device obviously is operated on energy. Yes, you can do that on a distributed fashion. For instance, you not necessarily have to rely on your local power grid, but you need some form of energy. Otherwise, it's very hard to facilitate a Bitcoin transaction. Same for Lightning transaction, of course. And that's certainly in a really severe scenario where we have like a multi-day or multi-week blackout that potentially could occur. It typically when you have, for instance, solar flares, when you have an X50 or higher event, which happens statistically every 10 to 12% every decade. This is the likelihood of a huge solar flare event. That could be potentially combined with a larger blackout, which lasts for not only days, but even longer than that. And that is a scenario where, say, okay, probably where all your devices are grilled by then, it probably makes sense to also have a bit of gold in your pocket or in your safe or in your vault. It doesn't mean that the Bitcoin will be worthless by then. Okay, so I even if like only a small part of Bitcoin nodes survive this incident, which is very likely because not everything at the same time is exposed to these kind of external events. So it's very likely that a couple of nodes will survive these types of events. Then yes, it takes a while to rebuild everything around, to rebuild infrastructure, to actually manufacture the energy and transformators required. But then your Bitcoin will be recovered after probably a couple of months. So yeah, I think this pretty much sums it up quite well. If there's questions, feel free to use the comment function or the chat function to push out your questions, and I will return to you as soon as possible. I hope you had an interesting time in my humble comparison of Bitcoin and gold, and yeah, see you next time. Take care.